The bully slapped a little black boy inside a diner, not knowing his dad was the boss of the Mafia. Before the silence of the diner, before the slap that would echo across an entire city, there was simply Luca Moretti, a quiet, brilliant 13-year-old boy growing up in Brooklyn Heights, where brownstone buildings met bustling streets and every corner carried stories. Luca's life, on the surface, looked like any other middle schooler's. But beneath his calm exterior, there was depth, a blend of intelligence, discipline, and quiet observation that made him different from the other kids at Jefferson Middle School. Every morning began the same way. Luca woke before sunrise, the faint sound of jazz from his father's old record player filling their modest but elegant brownstone. Giovanni Moretti, his father, was always downstairs by then. Sharply dressed even at breakfast, his posture straight, his movements deliberate. There was something about Giovanni that commanded respect without him ever needing to raise his voice. Neighbors nodded with a mix of admiration and caution when they saw him. He carried an aura of quiet power. Luca would sit across from him, eating toast and eggs while Giovanni read the newspaper. Their conversations were brief but meaningful. Giovanni often spoke in phrases that lingered in Luca's mind all day. A man's silence can be louder than his words. Or watch before you speak. Listen before you act. It wasn't the usual father-son relationship filled with chatter, but it was strong, built on trust, mutual respect, and an unspoken understanding. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share a word of love in the comments. By 7:30 a.m., Luca walked the tree-lined streets toward school, his well-worn school bag hanging neatly on his shoulder. He wasn't the loud kid in class. He wasn't the athlete or the joker. He was the quiet one, the one who noticed everything. Teachers admired his curiosity. He loved technology, spending hours after school repairing old gadgets, coding simple apps, and tinkering with circuits. His current passion project was something he called Document to Defend, a personal initiative to show how smartphones and digital tools could protect students from bullying and harassment. It wasn't just theory. He had diagrams, prototypes, and a vision of turning it into something real. At Jefferson Middle, however, brilliance wasn't always rewarded. Ethan Caldwell, a 16-year-old student with a reputation bigger than his abilities, ruled the halls. He was taller, stronger, and wealthier than most. His father, Robert Caldwell, was a prominent businessman and a major donor to the school district. Everyone, students and teachers alike, knew that challenging Ethan meant trouble. His bullying wasn't subtle. He shoved smaller students into lockers, spread humiliating rumors, and treated anyone outside his circle as if they were beneath him. Teachers looked the other way. The principal smiled politely at Ethan's father during board meetings. Parents whispered complaints at PTA gatherings but never acted. Ethan thrived in this environment, using his father's influence like a shield. Luca had observed Ethan's cruelty long before he became a target. He noticed how classmates' laughter around Ethan was forced, how fear masked itself as friendship. He saw the way younger kids avoided certain hallways just to not cross his path. He also noticed something more subtle, the way adults adjusted themselves when Ethan entered the room. That told Luca more than words ever could. Ethan wasn't just a bully. He was protected. After school, Luca's world was different. He spent evenings reading, coding, or sitting with his father as Giovanni prepared pasta in the kitchen. A family ritual passed down through generations. Giovanni's hands, though strong, moved with precision. He never talked about his past openly, but Luca wasn't naive. He'd heard whispers from neighbors, caught fragments of conversations in Italian, and seen the way strangers lowered their eyes when Giovanni entered a room. His father was respected and feared, but to Luca he was just dad. A man who taught him discipline, loyalty, and strategy. A man who never needed to prove his strength because everyone already understood it. On a chilly autumn evening, with golden leaves swirling across the sidewalks, Luca stayed late at school for his robotics club. He left after sunset, his project notes tucked neatly inside his bag. Instead of heading straight home, he decided to stop by Benny's Diner, a cozy neighborhood spot glowing with vintage neon lights. The diner was one of his favorite places, not because of the food, but because it felt safe. He'd sit in his usual corner booth, order a burger and fries, and quietly watch the world outside. It was his little sanctuary, away from the noise and power games of school. Inside, families chatted over milkshakes, a jukebox played faintly in the background, and waitresses moved with practiced ease. Luca took out his change to pay for his meal, counting coins on the table with the precision of someone raised to notice every detail. That's when the door swung open. Ethan Caldwell entered with two friends, laughing loudly, drawing attention as always. Their presence changed the atmosphere of the diner, the kind of shift you can feel but can't quite explain. Luca glanced up briefly, then returned to his coins. But Ethan's eyes had already found him. A quiet, well-dressed black boy sitting alone, calm and unbothered. To someone like Ethan, that wasn't harmless. It was threatening. Their eyes met for a second. In that brief moment, a seed was planted. One that would grow into something no one in that diner could predict. Ethan's smirk deepened. Luca didn't realize it yet, but he'd been marked. This night, which began as an ordinary stop for dinner, would soon turn into a turning point. It would be the night Luca's quiet strength collided head-on with cruelty and power. And it would reveal not only who Luca truly was, but who his father had always been. Because sometimes the most powerful stories don't begin with shouting. They begin quietly, in a diner, over scattered coins, just seconds before the world changes. The slap wasn't just a moment, it was a trigger. Inside Benny's Diner, everything unfolded in seconds. Luca was still counting his change when Ethan and his friends approached. Their laughter filled the space, loud enough to make other customers glance up uneasily. Without a single word, Ethan stepped forward and struck Luca across the face. The sound cut through the diner like a gunshot. Coins spilled across the floor. Luca's school bag slipped from his shoulder, thudding against the tiles. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Even the jukebox seemed to pause. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Ethan sneered, enjoying the silence he'd created. He shoved Luca against the wall, daring him to react. But Luca didn't lash out. He didn't cry. He reached calmly into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and pressed record. His eyes locked on Ethan's with quiet defiance. And then, with a voice steady enough to chill the room, he said his father's name, Giovanni Moretti. The moment the name left his lips, something changed. A couple of older men at a nearby table exchanged startled glances. The waitress froze mid-step. Even Ethan's confident smirk faltered for a split second. He tried to laugh it off, glancing at his friends as if to say, "Who cares?" But his unease showed in the way his hands shifted and his posture stiffened. Luca didn't say anything else. He picked up his bag, gathered his scattered coins one by one, and walked out of the diner without looking back. The entire room remained silent until the door closed behind him. But what could have ended as a single incident didn't. It grew. The next morning at Jefferson Middle, Ethan made sure of that. He saw Luca by his locker, calm as always, and decided to make him pay for that moment of quiet strength. First, he stole Luca's sneakers from the locker room during gym class, forcing him to walk back to class in socks while other students snickered. Then, he left mocking notes in Luca's locker, crude jokes targeting his race, his silence, and even his father. Teachers noticed, but no one intervened. One teacher glanced at the note, sighed, and crumpled it without reporting. Everyone knew whose son Ethan was. Everyone knew that challenging him meant trouble. But what Ethan didn't know was that Luca was documenting everything. Every note, every missing item, every shove in the hallway. He took photos with timestamps, saved screenshots, and kept a quiet record of witnesses' names, dates, and places. While Ethan escalated his cruelty, Luca was building something bigger. Midweek, things intensified. During gym class, Ethan accidentally elbowed Luca hard in the ribs during a scrimmage, knocking the wind out of him. Luca's classmates saw it happen. The coach looked away. The silence in the locker room afterward was heavy. Not sympathy, but fear. Ethan's power came not just from his wealth, but from the system around him that allowed him to be untouchable. Luca walked home that day with bruises forming under his shirt and a phone full of evidence. He didn't tell his father. Not yet. Giovanni had taught him patience, observation, strategy. And Luca understood something Ethan didn't. Power didn't always show itself in the moment. Sometimes it watched and waited. By Friday, the tension reached a breaking point. Ethan followed Luca into the school bathroom, flanked by two of his usual followers. The tile walls echoed with their footsteps. This wasn't random. This was intimidation. He cornered Luca near the sinks, mocking him, taunting him for daring to mention his father's name at the diner. But this time, Luca didn't quietly record. He put his phone on speaker and dialed a number. 1 ring, 2 rings. Then Giovanni's voice filled the tiled room. Calm, low, controlled. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply said Luca's name once, and then there was silence. Ethan's face drained of color. His friends stepped back instinctively. It wasn't what Giovanni said. It was how he said it. Every syllable carried weight. Luca ended the call without explanation, slipped the phone into his pocket, and walked out. Behind him, Ethan and his friends stood frozen, the swagger temporarily gone. That weekend, fear settled in. Ethan, who had always controlled others through intimidation, found himself sleepless. He replayed Giovanni's voice in his mind. He noticed unfamiliar cars outside his house. Were they really there? Or was it his own guilt? Either way, his confidence cracked. And then Monday arrived. Ethan walked into school, trying to act like nothing had changed. But whispers followed him. Luca had spent the weekend compiling a 38-page digital file. Photos, videos, audio clips, screenshots, witness lists, timestamps. Everything is meticulously arranged. And this time, he didn't keep it to himself. He emailed the file to the principal, copying key teachers and a few parents known for their activism. The principal, usually composed, called Ethan and his father into the office immediately. Faced with overwhelming evidence, they couldn't deny it. The principal had no choice but to suspend Ethan for 5 days and issue a public apology letter. Ethan's world began to shift. He wasn't untouchable anymore. His power, built on silence, was now threatened by documentation, precision, and quiet resilience. Luca didn't celebrate. Instead, he focused on his science project, polishing his presentation for the upcoming school assembly. Meanwhile, word spread among staff and students. Kids who had once stayed silent began to approach him, offering their own stories. Screenshots, messages, photos. 17 other students had suffered under Ethan's bullying, but fear had kept them quiet. Now they had someone willing to bring it all into the light. The school buzzed with rumors. Parents whispered at pickup lines. Teachers exchanged uneasy glances in the lounge. Something big was coming. The balance of power had shifted, and everyone felt it. The slap had started the fire. Luca's evidence was fueling it. And the upcoming school assembly? That would be the explosion. The diner had fallen into a strange kind of silence. Forks paused mid-air. Conversations froze. All eyes were locked on one corner booth, where a trembling 12-year-old boy stood face-to-face with a grown man twice his size. Malik could still feel the sting on his cheek. The slap had come out of nowhere. One moment, he was holding the door open for his little sister, Amira, excited about their weekend breakfast with their dad. Next, a stranger's hand had struck him with enough force to make his vision blur for a split second. The man, broad-shouldered, red-faced, wearing a leather jacket like some self-appointed sheriff, towered over him. "Watch where you're going, boy," he barked, his voice laced with venom that made the entire diner go stiff. Malik's breath hitched. He wasn't used to this kind of hate, not directed at him like a weapon. At school, he'd heard whispers, seen the subtle looks. But this was raw, public, loud. "Say sorry," the man demanded. His voice wasn't a request. It was a threat. Malik's hands clenched into fists at his sides. His instincts told him to run, but something inside, maybe pride, maybe pain, kept him rooted to the spot. "I didn't do anything," he whispered, but his voice was swallowed by the heavy silence. The diner manager peeked from behind the counter but didn't intervene. A few customers looked uncomfortable, but no one moved. Malik's sister started to cry softly, clutching his sleeve. The man stepped closer. "Don't talk back to me," he hissed, his face just inches from Malik's. And then, in one shocking motion, he shoved Malik backward. The boy stumbled into a chair, knocking over a tray of pancakes. Syrup splattered across the floor like spilled blood. A few gasps rippled through the diner, but still, nobody acted. "Enough!" The voice cut through the tension like a blade. Deep, controlled, and dangerous. Every head turned toward the entrance. Malik's father, Dante King, stood in the doorway. His tailored black suit looked almost too sharp for a morning diner. But it wasn't the clothes that made the room freeze, it was the aura. The kind of presence that made people instinctively step aside. Dante didn't rush. He walked toward the scene with deliberate calm, each step echoing across the tiled floor. His eyes locked on his son first, assessing the red mark on his cheek, the fear in his eyes. Then he turned his gaze on the man. "What," he said slowly, "did you just do to my son?" The man straightened up, suddenly unsure. He bumped into me. Disrespectful. I was just what?" Dante interrupted, his voice low but razor-sharp. "Teaching a child a lesson? Putting your hands on someone else's kid? Or was it something else? Something uglier?" The man shifted uncomfortably. "Don't make this about race," he muttered. "Oh, it's already about race," Dante replied. "You made it that way the second you opened your mouth." The tension in the room was electric now. A few people began whispering, phones discreetly raised. Malik could see waiters frozen in place, unsure whether to intervene or disappear. Dante stepped closer until he and the man were face to face. "Apologize," he ordered. The man laughed nervously. "Or what? You gonna call the cops? Good luck with that." Dante smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. "No," he said calmly. "I don't need the cops." It was in that moment that the man noticed two suited figures standing near the doorway. They hadn't been there before, or maybe he just hadn't noticed them. Broad men in dark coats, hands folded neatly in front, watching everything with cold, assessing eyes. Dante leaned in closer. "You made a mistake today, not because you picked the wrong boy, but because you thought no one would stand up to you. You thought this was just another day where you could get away with it." The man's confidence started to crack. I didn't mean to." "Oh, but you did," Dante said softly. "And now, everyone's watching." He gestured subtly toward the crowd. Phones were out. Someone was live streaming. A woman whispered, "That's Dante King," under her breath, and the name rippled through the diner like a shockwave. The man swallowed hard. I'm sorry," he stammered, finally turning to Malik. But Dante wasn't finished. He stepped between the man and his children, his shoulders squared like a wall. "You're going to remember this moment for the rest of your life," he said, "because this is the last time you ever raise a hand to someone who can't fight back." For a second, the diner was utterly silent. Then Dante raised his voice, addressing everyone. "If you see injustice and you stay silent, you become part of it. Today, all of you watched a grown man assault a child. Think about that the next time you look in the mirror." The words landed like thunder. The man's face turned pale. He stumbled toward the exit, muttering under his breath. The suited men shifted slightly, ensuring he didn't try anything else. Malik exhaled shakily, his heart pounding. Dante knelt in front of him, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. "You okay?" he asked softly. Malik nodded, but his eyes were glassy. This wasn't just about a slap. It was about being seen, being humiliated, and then finally being defended. Dante stood up, turned to the manager, and said in a voice that brooked no argument, "We'll talk later." As the man fled and the diner slowly came back to life, Malik realized something. This moment had changed everything. And little did he know, this public confrontation was only the beginning. What happened next would shake the entire town. The diner slowly returned to its usual buzz, but for Malik, nothing felt normal anymore. The clinking of plates, the low chatter, the smell of syrup and coffee, it all faded into the background like static. What stayed with him was the sting on his cheek and the silence that had followed it. He sat quietly in the booth, a half-eaten pancake in front of him, watching through the window as the man who had slapped him disappeared into the distance. For a brief moment, Malik imagined the man going home, maybe realizing what he'd done. But deep down, he knew this wasn't about one man. It never was. His father sat across from him, still composed but with a fire simmering just beneath the surface. Dante King was a man feared by many, respected by even more. But at that table, he wasn't the boss. He was a father looking at his son and realizing that power couldn't protect him from everything. "Listen to me," Dante said softly, leaning closer. "What happened today was wrong. You didn't deserve it. Not for a second. You understand that?" Malik nodded slowly, but questions swirled inside him. Why had no one helped? Why had the room full of adults stood frozen while a child was attacked? "Why didn't anyone say anything?" he finally asked. His voice was small but heavy. Dante exhaled deeply. "Because sometimes," he said, choosing his words carefully, "fear makes people quiet, and sometimes silence is easier than standing up." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "But their silence doesn't define your worth or your strength." Those words stayed with Malik long after the plates were cleared. Later that week, the incident exploded online. Someone's live stream had captured everything: the slap, the confrontation, Dante's speech. It spread across social media like wildfire. Headlines didn't just say, "Man slaps boy." They said, "Community watches racist attack in silence." People who had been in the diner that day found themselves under a spotlight. Some defended their silence with excuses. Others admitted their shame. And slowly, conversations began. Painful, overdue conversations about what it meant to be a bystander. For Malik, the attention was overwhelming at first. Strangers recognized him in the streets, some offering support, others just curious. But something shifted inside him. He wasn't just the boy who got slapped anymore. He was the boy who made people talk. Dante, too, felt the ripple effects. His name, already known in certain circles, was now attached to a moment of raw truth. For once, his influence wasn't about fear. It was about forcing people to confront a reality they'd ignored. The diner released a public statement. The manager apologized for not intervening sooner. The man who assaulted Malik was identified, questioned, and banned from the establishment. But even with those consequences, Dante knew justice wasn't just about one man facing punishment. Justice was about change. One evening, about 2 weeks after the incident, Dante took Malik for a walk through their neighborhood. The sun was setting, washing the streets in gold. Malik was quieter than usual, thoughtful. "You know," Dante said, "when I was your age, something like this happened to me. Except back then, no one said a word. No videos, No consequences, just pain and silence. Malik looked up at him, surprised. And that's why I spoke up, Dante continued. Because I promised myself if I ever saw it happen again, I wouldn't let it end the same way. Malik walked a little taller after that. The bruise on his cheek had faded, but something else had grown in its place. A kind of awareness he hadn't had before, a quiet strength. The incident became a story shared in classrooms, church groups, and community halls. It wasn't just about a slap anymore. It was about everyone in that diner. The man who acted, the people who froze, the father who spoke, and the boy who refused to disappear. And for those watching the video, for those hearing Malik's story now, it's not just a tale to scroll past. It's a mirror, because the truth is, racism doesn't always wear a uniform or shout its name. Sometimes it looks like a man in a leather jacket. Sometimes it looks like a room full of people who choose not to act. And sometimes it looks like us. The real question isn't what that man did. It's what we would have done. Would we have spoken up, stepped in, or stood silently, hoping someone else would take responsibility? Dante's words echo here. If you see injustice and you stay silent, you become part of it. This isn't just Malik's story. It's a wake-up call. So the next time you witness something wrong, whether it's on the street, online, in a classroom, or in a diner, remember this moment. Remember the silence. And choose differently, because change doesn't start with someone. It starts with you. What did you think about Luca's story? His journey wasn't just about standing up to a bully. It was about using intelligence, patience, and truth to bring real change. If this story moved you, or made you think about how you'd react in a similar situation, share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. And if you want more powerful, true-inspired stories like this, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us keep telling stories that matter.